We are now broadcasting.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending upon where you are. And welcome to a conversation with the CMMC-AB. My name is Roy Hadley. I am the chair of the Information Security Society for the Technology Association of Georgia. And I am also a lawyer practicing in the cybersecurity, privacy, and data management areas at Adams and Reese. Welcome today. Also, you see on your screen, we have Cassia Baker, who is with the Georgia Department of Economic Development. And before I introduce myself, I'm going to let Cassia introduce herself briefly to just let you know who she is and what she and Amy Hutnell, who also is with the Georgia Department of Economic Development, have to do with today's program. So Cassia?
Thanks, Roy. And thank you all for taking time to be here during what I'm sure is your lunch break. We are here to talk about CMMC, and my colleague Amy Hudnall and I at the Georgia Department of Economic Development have been working to spread the word about CMMC and what is required. We have a number of resources that I'll be speaking about after we've concluded our conversation here. And I'll also be sharing my contact information directly so that if you have additional questions about those resources, for example, you're a small business and you'd like to get in touch with our small business team or our trade team, I'll be able to help connect you there. So again, at the end of our conversation, stay tuned because I'll give you some updates on resources and then provide my direct contact information. Thanks, Roy.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cassia. So a couple of housekeeping notes before I introduce our guests today, Carlton Johnson and Wayne Boline. We are, as you can see, we have the screen up. We're going to turn the video off just so that we make sure the bandwidth is working and we make sure that the sound quality comes, is up to par. So Cassie and I will turn our screens off and you will see the main screen with the beautiful pictures of Mr. Johnson and Mr. Boline on your screen. Also, we are recording this, and so please, if you have to drop off or if you have somebody that you think should watch this, it will be, it is recorded and we will be posting it on the Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force website, which is hosted by TAG, the Technology Association of Georgia. I also do want to point out that we have the live Q&A going in the chat feature. And so we will be talking to Mr. Johnson and Boline live here, and then please put your questions into the chat and we will pull those at the end and ask those live. So if you have questions throughout, please feel free to put those in the chat. We will be getting those and we will be asking those. So with those housekeeping notes in place, I'm going to turn off my screen and away we go. So we are very fortunate, and just by way of background, the Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force was started by a combination of the Georgia Department of Economic Development, who has Cybersecurity Edge, and also the Technology Association of Georgia. Those two entities formed the task force with the goal of helping those members, those small businesses, small mid-sized businesses in Georgia that are part of the Defense Industrial Base Task Force to learn about and ultimately become certified in CMMC. If you're listening today, you probably know what CMMC stands for, but I'll say it anyway, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. So, that's one of the things that the task force is doing. This is I believe, our third webinar. The first one was just a general overview of CMMC. The second was a very good presentation, great presentation by Mark Lupo with the University of Georgia, where he talked about the steps necessary to achieve CMMC Level 1 certification, which is the base level that everyone will, at a minimum, have to achieve, which is basic cyber hygiene. We won't go into the levels of CMMC here at the front end. We may get into it a little bit in our discussion today, but today we have two members of the CMMC-AB, the accreditation body board, with us. We're very honored to have them, and we look forward to an insightful and delightful conversation. First, we have Carlton D Johnson, who is the vice chairman of the CMMC-AB board of directors, and we also have Wayne Boline, who is also on the CMMC-AB board of directors. Without going into too much introduction, both of these gentlemen are very distinguished and have very long careers in cybersecurity and are, very, I'm not going to say patriotic, but are very helpful in terms of volunteering their time and energy to help CMMC get stood up and to help people like the small businesses, small mid-sized businesses that are on this call today to learn about CMMC-AB, CMMC, and the certification process. So Mr. Johnson, by way of background, is a senior exec with over 32 years of experience, decorated combat veteran. He was served as the CIO for the Multinational Security Transition Command in Iraq. Just a very distinguished career. Retired in 2014 after serving over 26 years, retired as a colonel. And we're just so fortunate to have him here to share his wisdom and expertise today. Mr. Boline, also a veteran who had a very distinguished military career, is currently at Raytheon and Missile Systems in Arizona. We were talking earlier before the call about how good it is in Arizona and the food choices and those sorts of things. So, we'll be just delighted to hear from him. He served as the chairman of the board of the Defense Security Information Exchange and is currently on the board of the National Defense ISAC. And so again, I could keep going on and on with both of these gentlemen with respect to their bona fides and their careers. But in order to get to the meat of what we're here to do, I will cut it there and just say, welcome, gentlemen. Pleased to have you here today.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So first question is going to be to both of you, but we'll start with you. And Mr. Johnson, just for ease, and you too, Mr. Boline, is it okay if I call you Carlton and Wayne, or?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And just so you know, we are extremely patriotic. So you were right on target with that.
Okay, no doubt. And that's a great thing, and we do appreciate your past service and your current service in terms of helping stand this CMMC thing up, because it's such an involved process, but one would argue a process that is sorely needed. So with that said, Carlton, can you give us a little background on why CMMC is here? What precipitated CMMC, and why are we doing what we are doing right now?
Well, absolutely. And thanks, Roy, first of all, for the opportunity to have a chance to speak with your constituents and to just get into the heart of this. Why are we doing this? There's a really extraordinary woman named Katie Arrington, who is the CISO for the Assistant Secretary of Defense of Acquisition. And she made a couple comments early on, several months ago, and started with, when you're looking at the NIST 800-171, and this is a quote: if we were doing all the necessary security controls, we wouldn't be getting exfiltrated to the level that we are. And to kind of illustrate that, if you go online, I'll just ask your team to Google this, and you look at the F-35 fighter, and then you look at a picture of the Chinese version, which is the Chengdu J-20. Those two pictures, when you put them side by side, that is one of the biggest testaments as to why we're doing CMMC. We need to protect not only the defense chain, but the defense supply chain. And when you look at those pictures and go into the data of how things happened. I won't get into those details. I will just communicate that the weak link has been the defense supply chain. And it's not because people aren't trying to do good things. It's that we haven't had the chance to operationalize and set a maturity level so that the entire defense industrial base DIB gets better over time and space. The initial NIST 800-171 when it came out was a good step. But the unfortunate thing about that was that it required people to self-attest. And that presupposes that everybody is going to do all the details, step up to their game, and do all the controls. Unfortunately, we found that wasn't the case. So Ms. Harrington, along with the DoD team, created CMMC. They asked industry to self-form. And what we did as a board is, I think we started back in November, and come January of this year, we self-organized into the CMMC accreditation body, started with 15 members, and we have been working hand in hand in partnership with DoD to operationalize the CMMC model and the standard and create a accreditation, training, and certification process and an ecosystem, which we'll talk about later, to help make this come into play. And this is not going to be a one-stop shop. This is going to be something that happens over the next 5 years. But we have started strong with this year. And it all comes down to protecting national security, protecting the defense supply chain, and upping everybody's game across the board.
Fantastic. That is great background. Now, you know, that would lead one to say, okay, and I've seen a statistic out there that out of the ones that companies that self-certified, 45% of those companies that's kind of self-certified probably could not pass the equivalent level of CMMC, the levels 1 through 5, whatever they would be tasked with doing. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, and I'll share this question with Wayne too. From my personal experience, absolutely. And when you're trying to get to the why behind the what, again, it's not that people aren't trying to do the best they can. I would submit that unless you get into the details and recognize that the technology controls that have to be in place, it is not just an IT problem, it is a business problem. And one of the things that I've seen in industry as I've communicated this prior to getting on the board, companies want to just throw this to the IT shop or just throw it to the CIO. And when things go wrong, those are the first people they fire. But when you look at the controls in this 800-171, those are a mix of technology and processes. And so this gets into the entire organization. And I think that's why it has been so difficult. With the new model, it helps to alleviate that by, first of all, making sure that everybody understands this is a pass-fail. When I say pass-fail, you can't do POAMs, you can't do a plan of action and milestones. You have to get it done up front. Mm-hmm. And whether you're a small organization or a large one like Raytheon, there are different levels that you can achieve. If you get to the level 3, which again we'll talk about, the level 3 is where you're going to get this information called Controlled Unclassified Information, or CUI. That is the equivalent of the NIST 800-171 plus some additional practices and processes. But again, if you're a small organization, like a 2-person shop, you may want to be a level 1, and those are basic cybersecurity controls. So going forward, I think what's going to happen to ease some of the problems we've seen in the past, there's a flight path for everyone to improve their game, starting with basic controls all the way up to the level 5 where you have CUI plus. Wayne, do you have any amplifying comments?
Yes, thank you. Just real quick, a little bit of a modification to my introduction. Actually, I started with Raytheon in Tucson. I'm no longer located there, and just happened to be 17 years ago today after I retired from the Air Force. I'm currently in Richardson, Texas. But one of the differences between the DFARS 7012 that currently governs the defense industrial base when it comes to cybersecurity is it was kind of a one-size-fits-all, trying to protect the CUI that Karlton mentioned. And if you didn't have the DFARS clause in your contract because you didn't have any CUI, there was really nothing that dictated any level of cybersecurity at all. And then the contrast with the CMMC model is it's a maturity model with 5 levels, so that even if you don't have CUI, there's the 17 basic general good hygiene you get at level 1, and then level 3 generally equates to DFARS to protect that CUI. In addition to that, if there's data that's even more sensitive, at the level 4 and 5, there's the ability to prescribe more controls to deal with the APT and the higher level threats. So the level of granularity you're able to introduce with the CMMC model is much more, gives the ability to protect at a much better level. And it's also cost effective, because if you just need level 3, that's fine. You don't have to levy that across everything. But if you have level 5 that comes at a greater cost, you can understand that that's necessary and apply that.
Okay. And, you know, cost is going to be a big question, and we'll come back to that. So I'll give you a few moments to get your thoughts together on that. But I do want to go back to something, Carlton, that you said, and I'd like your opinion on this too, also, Wayne. And that is, you know, one of the things that we've always preached in the cybersecurity world is that cybersecurity is not an IT issue. It is an organizational issue. And, you know, my question would be, do you think that the current standards for CMMC, levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever they may be, adequately address kind of that institutional aspect of, you know, you just have to have cyber hygiene and hygiene across the board, and not just in the IT department? And, you know, does CMMC in its current form really address that issue?
So I believe yes, and I'll qualify my answer as follows. First of all, you know, the model itself from a technology perspective does address the 17 domains that you've seen in other standards. So access control, asset
Right.
management, and so forth. When you add on the additional practices and processes, that's when, and the maturity piece itself, that's when it starts to migrate away from pure technology, because you have to look at the flow of information as it is coming through the organization, not only in physical or digital terms, but physical terms. And so the conversation really needs to be, you know, where as an organization do we have sensitive data? And in this particular case, where do we have CUI? If it's within the finance side, then how does finance manage that? That's got to be a conversation between the IT people and the finance people. And then based off of that discussion, now you layer over not only the technology controls, but the physical processes that the finance people will need to do. Case in point, if you happen to print out that information, you know, and you move it within your office space, if that's CUI, is that an IT problem? No, it's a physical security problem, but it's also a finance problem because that finance data has to be protected. So the CMMC model starts to walk you through the various domains. It layers on top of that practices, which is a little bit different than, I believe, the previous standard. And then those additional processes all come together to help you say from a maturity level 1 through X, where are we as an organization? And that is agnostic of the technology, right? So that's how I see that it's a bit different.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to pivot here, gentlemen, on you a second. And, you know, and the pivot is because a lot of the callers, if not most of the callers on the phone are, you know, going to be suppliers in the supply chain, or they're going to be people that may want to be RPOs or C3PAOs, or, you know, that actually see an opportunity in providing these services to the supply chain. So I'm going to bifurcate the conversation here for a second, and I'll go to the first part, and let's talk about the suppliers and, you know, kind of the timing on getting certified and that sort of thing. I know one of the concerns that I am hearing out in the industrial base is how, am I going to miss out on any contract opportunities? I'm hearing, and this is not me speaking, I'm relaying thoughts. I'm hearing that it may take a year or two, or it may be 5 years before everybody's certified. Am I going to miss out on any opportunities contractually with the DoD because I'm not certified and I can't get certified because of a backlog or anything like that? Has the CMMC thought about, or AB thought about, how accreditation will be prioritized, or how, if you do have and you want to bid on it on a particular contract, is there a way to fast track your certification to alleviate that concern? Because I think a lot of people are getting worried that they may miss out on contractual opportunities because they can't get certified in time. Is that something the CMMC-AB is thinking about, or what are your thoughts on that?
Wayne, you want to start from Raytheon perspective?
Well, I don't know that it's a Raytheon perspective, but the general perspective across the DoD and the CMMC-AB is that nobody wants to prevent any company from competitively pursuing contract opportunities.
Right.
With that said, the supply and demand of those OSCs, as they're called, organizations seeking certification, versus the supply of assessors, initially, obviously, there's going to be a tilt towards much more demand than there is supply. However, it's anticipated that prioritization of those companies who have an active RFI or RFP they are responding to that requires a specific CMMC level will have priority over companies just trying to be proactive. Mm-hmm. With that said, then it gets into, well, how would you prioritize individual companies who are all competing for multiple contracting opportunities? I think it just all has to be worked out. I think the priority is in preparation, right, for the assessments when they're available. But you can rest assured the DoD and the AB is doing everything possible to keep the supply at the appropriate level, and then be prepared to work with companies and the customers on the defense side on how they can prioritize that and make sure nobody's business opportunities are prevented.
Right. And I'll follow up on that question. And this may be, because you are at Raytheon, but this doesn't have to necessarily be a Raytheon perspective, because I know how things can go like that. But are you seeing, is the CMMC-AB seeing larger contractors, the big primes, implementing their own kind of programs to help their subs and their suppliers comply with CMMC, with the thought that, we as a prime don't want to get stuck not having the ability to have suppliers participate with us and putting us in a jam? So are you seeing some of the larger contractors and primes implementing these kind of programs to help their suppliers, or, kind of is everybody for themselves right now?
I don't think, I mean, obviously there's lots of discussion on how, if a key supplier who makes that magical widget we always use for our analogies cannot meet a certain level for whatever reason, or a timely level, obviously you're going to want to work with them, but that's nothing new. Right. That happens already, because CMMC is just one requirement of the many requirements that are levied on subs and primes from the government, for everything from compliance with financial standards, whatever the case may be. As a good illustration, Raytheon, we've been active in helping our suppliers for years. We've had an active supplier cybersecurity assessment program that's purely voluntary, where we sent out our own maturity model several years ago. We've done this for years, probably 6-7 years. We sent out our own version, they filled it out, and then when we needed a surge capability several years ago, I actually got to go out and meet with the supplier and follow up on that checklist and talk about how they're doing things and how they're mature at the different requirements. And the end product was we provided them with basically a chart showing where they're at, suggested things they could do to increase their cybersecurity, and so on. And it was it's a good program. It's in a sense free consulting, but it's what we recognize as how important our supply base is and what we could do to help them. And I think the same thing similar to that's going to happen in this instance, because everybody wants everybody to be successful. However, there will be limitations on how much you can do depending on, how broad your supply base is and how many resources you have, because each of the primes is looking at helping their suppliers is also having to look inward at its implementing CMMC within our own company also.
Right.
Hey, Roy, this is Carl. If I can just add an amplified comment, and I just want to clarify something that I said earlier. And when I conveyed to Wayne about the Raytheon perspective, I just need to say this. We as an AB, we are company agnostic. And what I probably should have said, because words do matter, Wayne is an company is an OSC, an organization seeking certification. So for clarification, just so everybody knows where I'm coming from,
Right.
when I'm asking those questions, I'm really asking it from an OSC perspective, because the OSCs do have a unique perspective whereby a C3PAO or RP or others would have a different perspective. So just for a clarifying comment.
Absolutely. So, that's a good point to ask this question. And that is, who are the CMMC-AB? You all obviously have great chops in the cybersecurity, defense areas, but the CMMC-AB is who? It's what is it exactly? Because you all are, I'm not going to say volunteering your time, but you're all taking on this big task to help implement CMMC.
Well, you're right on target. We are an all volunteer force. We're registered as a non-stock corporation, nonprofit in Maryland. We are and consist of all volunteers. Every single person who is on the CMMC board, both was volunteered, and with the initial 7 that were part of the initial working groups, we went out and did elections, if you will, for the additional 7. So going forward, anybody else coming on board would be a volunteer and an elected person. The directors are very diverse. We have many who are small businesses, but many who have worked in or currently work in large organizations. Several have government experience, some have military experience. And so part of what we were looking for was a representation that was indicative of the entire ecosystem, if you will. People who are on the board of directors serve, and this is very important, serve as individuals and not as representatives of our parent organizations. And that's one of the reasons I was clarifying that comment. For example, you'll note that typically when you talk with us, unless we're trying to provide a clarifying or amplifying point, we'll usually not go back to organizations that we work with, unless we're trying to make a point. We are very focused and founded on our ethics and our strong mission focus. For example, a director cannot be an individual assessor, nor can they be affiliated with a C3PAO. And all directors sign a strict conflict of interest policy, and that requires us to disclose and recuse ourselves from topics whereby we may be an interested party. So the board of directors are all volunteer force, and our main focus, our main effort is to operationalize that training, the accreditation, certification aspects of the CMMC model and CMMC standard. So that's who we are. We're agnostic as an organization. When we come to the fight, what we're bringing to the fight are the skills and years of experience we have, but we're focused on developing this ecosystem to help the supply chain and the ultimate customer, the Department of Defense.
Fantastic. So, I guess, again, it goes without saying, thank you for your continued service to, to the country and to the defense of our country on the cyber level and otherwise. Much appreciated. So kind of going back to CMMC, one of the things that I have seen recently, or not recently, but the certification, once you get certified, lasts for 3 years. And two questions pop out of that. First, is it possible to be decertified during those 3 years, i.e., if you fall off the wagon, can you be decertified from a CMMC perspective? And also, kind of this follow-on question to that is, are you anticipating monitoring during those 3 years? So once you get certified, is it, will you see continuous monitoring or auditing, or how will that work from a certification process?
So when you want to start with that one?
Not really.
I'll talk a little bit more just to give you time to gather your thoughts on it. If I'm not mistaken, I saw or heard wind of an RFP coming out about for a solution to actually monitor certification levels. And it may be that that answer isn't there yet, but it may just be that that's something that's being contemplated by the CMMC-AB and or the DoD.
And the answer is, and that is still something that is being worked out. When you're certified, the certification lasts for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And within those 3 years, and I'm going to go with what I understand right now, but I want to go back and just do the double check on this. I don't like to throw out information if I'm not 100% sure, but in this case, during that 3-year period, if something comes up, if something happens, let's say that there's a breach or what have you, I would submit that probably depending on what happened with that breach and how it came by, there may have to be a relook if you were initially certified and then something changed. That process and how that would be done is still being worked out, and that would be driven primarily by our DoD customer.
Mm-hmm.
We would work in partnership with them.
But
go ahead.
At its most basic level, everybody realizes that a CMMC assessment's a snapshot in time, and
right.
You can't ignore that for 3 years and then come back and visit again. It's just, what is that fine balance between the resources it would take and being too intrusive into monitoring versus enough monitoring to adequately keep an eye on things and make sure that if there's a significant change, then an assessment was to be reaccomplished. So still trying to figure out exactly what that balance should be.
Okay, fantastic. I appreciate that. So we'll keep an eye, organizations like ours, the Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force, will keep an eye on those types of developments and alert, our constituents so that they can stay up to speed on those sorts of things. So, this is a plug now, a commercial break for the task force, because on our website, which we'll post the link to, we actually do keep up in our blog with developments that come down from the CMMC-AB and or the DoD regarding CMMC. So we'll endeavor to kind of keep abreast of those types of developments. One thing, and that's the end of the commercial break. One thing that a big topic is cost, and a lot of the suppliers in the state of Georgia and elsewhere are small to mid-sized businesses, and so cost comes into play. I know that the cost of certification hasn't been finalized yet. Obviously, the cost of getting yourself up to the point where you can be certified or have that audit done is dependent upon where you're starting from. But I know the CMMC-AB is thinking about that. And, are there any resources or anything that, you as members of the board of the AB can point people that are listening to on this, either from a self-assessment standpoint to help get ready, or other resources that may be out there to help small and mid-sized businesses bear the cost of certification?
So I'll hit the first question, which is on costs overall. That's a hard thing to answer, and that primarily stems from, it depends on how much work an organization has done to date. Case in point, if I'm a mid-level supplier, say a company of 20,000 people, and I have done nothing with regards to the NIST 800-171, chances are my costs are going to be a lot higher to get ready for CMMC as opposed to someone who has already done certified, well, I'll say certified, validated, and self-attest accurately that they completed the NIST 800-171 controls.
Right.
If I'm a small organization, again, a 2-person, 3-person shop, and my intention today is not to get any contracts that have CUI in them, I'm probably looking at a level 1, level 2. So again, if I've done the basics already, if I have basic antivirus software, I have my firewall set up and so forth, then my cost will more likely be less to get ready for a level 1 or level 2 as opposed to someone who's going to have to hire a consultant to come in and help them get started. So that question on cost is hard to answer. What I will say is the right thing to ask in that regard is what can you do to get better prepared so that when CMMC rolls out fully, you can meet that head on? And my answer would be start with what is already out there. The NIST 800-171 controls is a very good start. The CMMC practices and the model itself is a conglomeration of various standards and best practices. But that one will get you out the gate early on. And then we look at how the costs roll out. On the resources, I know that Wayne has got some experience with that. So Wayne, do you want to hit a couple of those resources?
Sure, thank you. So for those organizations that think they're going to be anywhere near level 3 and have to deal with NIST 800-171, there's a companion NIST 800-171A, which is an assessment guide you use to assess against 171 controls. And that guide can be used to perform that self-assessment you speak of. And that's very helpful. I put a link into the chat box for everyone. As was mentioned earlier, I'm on the board of the National Defense ISAC, and we are a mix of very large companies all the way down to small and mediums. And we put together a working group that created this Cyber Assist webpage with CMMC resources. And it is also vendor agnostic. And it was a group of smart people that just pulled together resources based on CMMC on what they thought might help reach CMMC compliance across the various controls and practices. That should be very helpful. I was very impressed with that. And so those are the 2 things you could really start using right now to get started. As far as costs and keeping costs down, this is just me personally speaking my opinion, but I think what CMMC is going to do that may be a benefit is it's going to make companies look at how they flow data across the supply base. If you don't have to flow down an entire package of data that contains CUI to your suppliers for them to accomplish the work they're doing, then don't do it. That'll reduce cost. If you can keep that from happening, then maybe that supplier only has to be a level 1, significantly more inexpensive than a level 3, and you become creative on how they access that level 3 data, or you don't need to flow. I think it's going to cause a lot of creativity on limiting data flows because
right.
Carlton hears me beating the drum constantly is the controls and protections follow the data. When people ask, well, what level am I going to have to flow down to my suppliers? The protections follow the data. So if you can limit the flow of data by being creative on how the data is accessed and used, then you have the ability to then limit the controls that follow it, which equal to increased cost in a lot of cases.
Hey, Roy, to amplify on that, and I'm going to harken back to my Fortune 500 experience and being non-attribution, if you will, was working with an organization. They started to flow down the DFARS clause to the organization I've been supporting, and the company who was pushing down was really, really adamant. You got to have this in place. You got to have this in place. And then I asked the basic question. So is there any CUI that you have that you intend to flow down as part of this contract? And if so, have you identified it, qualified it? Do we know how much it is? And have you tried to minimize it? And there was dead silence on the other end of the call. They hadn't even asked that question. They didn't know. And what we found out was there was no CY going to be flown down to this supplier. And so to Wayne's point, that is a sweet spot where, if you want to manage those costs, first ask the question, what type of data are you going to have coming down? Even if there's no CY, but there might be the FCI that we've talked about in the past. Okay, then you want to have some basic controls in place to protect that and know exactly what you have. If there's none at all, then you might just want to go with the basic controls. However, and this is where I'll say the other side of this is, if I'm an organization and I'm trying to compete in this new marketplace where cyber threats are pervasive, being able to communicate that you are cyber ready to a certain level is a potential force enabler. And if I have two companies, this is me personally speaking, if I have two companies, one who's not cyber ready and the other one who's gone the additional length, I probably will want to lean towards one that has done it. So they protect my IP, they protect our IP, and we can partner together to go after the larger contracts. So just something to consider.
Right. And I think you gentlemen brought up an excellent point, and it's one that, in my world, we always harp on is data. You follow the data, you protect the data, you understand the data. And I think for people that are listening right now that are thinking about CMMC certification and what level, is really understanding data flows and what needs to be protected, and really, quite honestly, going back and rethinking whether certain data needs to flow to suppliers in order for them to do what they need to do. And if you're a supplier, do you need certain data? Because to your point, if you don't, that may decrease the level of certification that you need. Quick question though, you mentioned, kind of being a force enabler and, kind of a leg up if you are certified. Will there be a public database of certified suppliers and people in the DoD chain, supply chain, and what level of certification they have achieved, or how will that work?
Right now, and Wayne, just if you would check my homework, I'm not tracking that we will be publishing that, and with DoD, so I don't have an answer for that right now. That's not something I'm looking at.
It's not going to be publicly available because that information is at a minimum.
Yeah.
I know they don't use it anymore for official use only.
Right.
The companies and individuals that need access to that information as part of a contracting process will have access to it, but it just won't be generally publicly available because there's no reason for it. How exactly that access is provided into who, least privileged sort of aspect is still to be worked out.
Right. So if I'm a supplier or a prime and I need, subs and they say they're certified, there will be a mechanism for me to make sure that they're certified prior to my submission of, a bid or something like that is what.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
It's just that the mechanics of that happening are not firm yet.
Okay. And then I'm going to pivot here because we're getting close and we want to save some time for Q&A because we do have some that have come into the chat box. Switching over to the C3PAOs and those types, companies that want to be C3PAOs, RPOs, those sorts of things. Can you give just a little bit of insight? I know there's a lot of information on the CMMC-AB website that I would point everybody to, but is there anything that they should be thinking about to get a leg up on being accredited themselves to do these types of assessments? Or if you're an RPO, to assist companies with CMMC certification, that sort of thing? Or should they just keep an eye on the CMMC-AB website?
Yeah, I would say, that we have tried to do a yeoman's job of keeping the website up to date and current. And so as soon as we know something that is ready for public consumption, we push it out there. So to the point, if people are looking to become a C3PAO and they want to learn how to do that, that is all readily available on the website today. Additionally, if you're looking or to become or if your organization is seeking certification, we have a flow path that's been identified. And typically, and again, this is notional, this is not hard and fast. We've said that from flash to bang, you're probably looking at 6 months from identification that you want to become certified, and assuming all things go well and you follow the steps, you would be certified within that time frame. But again, that's still fluid. But everything we have is currently available on the website.
Okay, fantastic. So, we've got a bunch of questions. So I am going to kind of go back and go live and get Cassia back on the line here and really just start to answer some of those questions that we saw, excuse me, that are coming through the chat box. So Cassia, if you are there, I'm going to ask you to come back on.
Hi, Roy. I am here. I am looking through the chat, and I will tell you, Wayne and Carlton, the questions are quite long, so bear with me for a minute. We'll start with the chat question. One comes to us asking, I work for a cybersecurity consulting firm, and we're interested in becoming a C3PAO. In reviewing CMMC version 1.02 standard, the concept of scoping and segmentation doesn't seem to be perfectly clear. Are there other documents or resources that we can reference to better understand how to limit scope through segmentation?
This is Wayne. From a C3PAO assessor's perspective, it is not their responsibility to do anything more than understand the scope of the assessment. You don't really get into telling a company how to scope through segmentation and so on. But one of the most critical things, and it's another foot stomper I key on also, is one of the most important aspects of the engagement when you go to a company for assessment is the scope. The scope needs to be clearly understood up front, and then that's what the assessment is performed within, excuse me. But the assessor may have to ask some questions along the line, kind of along the lines of segmentation is, okay, this is your defined scope. How do you enforce that scope? How do you ensure the COI that's performing under the contract that you're pursuing and needing the CMMC assessment for doesn't get outside of that scope that we're assessing against? So scope is very important, but that's something to be negotiated and understood at the front end of an assessment.
Okay. And something that, Wayne, I'll throw this to you, and maybe Carlton can jump in as well. A question came in that says, what does the end date 2025 mean? 100% worldwide implementation. Many SBs say they will wait until 2024. This is the horizon date and needs to be fleshed out, please.
Well, it's certainly not worldwide. Initially, it's a US-based, but there's interest to go worldwide. I think, and I always hesitate to speak for the DoD, but I'm going to speak for the DoD. But I think what they're looking at then is by 2025, the CMMC clause, however it comes out, will be in every DoD contract. Initially that's going to be a phased rollout, but by that date, it's anticipated, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carlton, it will be in every contract that comes from the DoD with a level 1 minimum requirement.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what that date means.
All right, another question for you now about foreign vendors. Some foreign vendors will need CMMC certs next year. How will certification of foreign-owned firms be dealt with? Can USA certifiers meet those needs? How do you envision the CMMC program against other firms, Chinese firms?
So that I'm going to qualify that my answer here by saying that's a work in progress, and that is something that we're working with DoD. It falls into the conversations of reciprocity and also with what type of work those organizations are doing. Case in point, if a company, a foreign company is making an F-35 part, right? Then there's got to be a conversation starting with DoD from a memorandum perspective, the things that they have right now with working with that foreign organization, and then that flows into reciprocity and also now a conversation with the CMMC-AB. But it starts with DoD at that point. That is something that's being worked out right now. That's about the level of detail I can provide today, but just understand that DoD is taking the lead to look at that, and we'll coordinate with the AB so we can know how we would prosecute our mission from that perspective.
Thank you, Carlton. Another question, Wayne, I'll throw this one to you. Many small businesses want a bolt-on solution versus a baked-in solution. Do you have an opinion on that?
That seems to lead toward wanting a easy button, if I may say, the bolt-on solution. And I don't know that that exists, especially at the higher levels. Because at the higher levels, there's a certain amount of maturity which says you have ingrained processes and it's part of your culture. And a bolt-on solution doesn't really speak of culture. So I don't think it's that simple, depending on the level of certification you're looking at. There may be bolt-on solutions available at the level 1, but as you get higher, it's less and less chance of that happening.
And a question for you both, which goes back to the defense industrial base as a whole. The question here says, of the 350,000 businesses in the DIB, what portion do you foresee as needing level 1?
I actually got that somewhere. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't remember the specific number, but in the briefings from the DoD, it's the vast majority of that number. I don't know what the percentage they've briefed is, but it's pretty high.
Yeah.
And I guess one follow-on question to that has come up before, and I think I know the answer, but I'll defer to the experts here, is if you are achieve level 3 certification, then that necessarily means you are level 2 and level 1 certified, correct?
That's correct. The model and the standard and the model build on each other. So if you're level 3, you have to go through steps 1 through 2. And Wayne said something earlier that I didn't comment on, but the CMMC methodology looks at changing culture overall as well. So when you have done a level 3, the understanding is that you've met level 1 to level 2 controls, not only from a technology perspective, but your maturity level and your culture has evolved to a point where now you are ready to assume responsibility for getting the CUI information.
And back to the tying this back to my scoping commentary, you also have to remember though that if you have a level 3 assessment and you do it on a narrowly defined scope to minimize cost in your organization, that level 3 translating to a 1 and 2 is only for the scope of that level 3 assessment. That won't tie into your entire organization. Larger organizations can anticipate to have many scoped assessments at varying levels depending on the specific contracts, their infrastructure. A company may want to go for a level 5 across the entire company. Other companies may want to, depending on the amount of defense business they have, create an enclave, very narrowly scope all DoD activity in that enclave and then have it assessed at whatever level they believe they need to operate at. There's just so many variables and possibilities of managing risk and cost that it's hard to say there is a cookie cutter or a simple answer.
So just to follow up on that, just to make sure everybody that's on the call today understands, is that just because you are level 3 certified, it may be that you're level 3 certified for a particular narrow scope, and it doesn't mean that you are then in a position to, go after any or participate in any RFI that calls for a level 3 certification.
Yeah, because I would anticipate the customer, if you are showing that you are level 3, expecting the work under that contractor pursuing to be performed within the boundaries of that scope to level 3 assessment.
Okay.
And let's be honest, it's going to be an integrity issue. You can say, yeah, it's all going to be done there and everything's fine. And you may not get caught until there's a data breach that involves that data because it was outside the boundary. But that's how it has to happen, is the data in the contract requiring a specific level of protection has to stay within the scoped boundaries of that assessed environment.
Hey, Roy, let me jump on that too. And this gets back to what I said earlier about this is a business conversation versus just a technology conversation. To Wayne's point, if you're a supplier and you built widget X, right? And let's just say for this example, only 20% of your business revenue for your entire company is defense related. Everything else is commercial. And then you go through and you do a CMMC level X certification. If you're going to now say my entire company is CMMC level 3, then what you're implicitly saying is anywhere in my company, even though only 20% of my defense revenue is in this location, I'm going to be able to move CUI throughout my entire organization. If you're saying that and that's true and you've done that, okay, that's good. Great on you, because now you've gone above and beyond. You've not only protected this particular type of information called CUI, but now you've matured your entire organization and you're able to move it ubiquitously throughout your entire enterprise. That is what Wayne was getting to, is I believe an integrity issue, because if it's the opposite, then you're A, being disingenuous. You're going to get caught probably too. B, you haven't really looked at this for what it's supposed to be, which is I want to raise my game for my entire organization. And that becomes a cost decision. So from a business perspective, if you're going to only have a certain amount of defense revenue, the other question you should ask is, if I want to protect my overall IP agnostic of defense revenue, is it in my best interest to improve my cybersecurity readiness and maturity level? And can I leverage CMMC to do that on the off chance that down the road I'll get additional work that I'll disperse throughout my enterprise? That is a business decision. It is not something that the IT shop makes for the corporation. The IT shop enhances the ability to meet that need.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank both of you because I see we're getting close to time. I will say it's been a very interesting conversation. The conversation keeps going because we have up to 15 questions still in the chat. So we'll wrap it up here, but I know that both of you are open to an ongoing conversation. So hopefully this isn't the last time we hear from you. But I wanted to remind everyone in the audience to please fill out the poll so we can hear more about how we can help you further. We at the Georgia Department of Economic Development, as I mentioned, we are here to help support small businesses, to help our defense industrial base. If you need assistance and you are a small business, please don't hesitate to be in touch with me directly. I can be reached at cbaker@georgia.org. Again, cbaker@georgia.org, and we will have a link in a slide after this presentation to some of the tools and resources we have, such as the Georgia Defense Exchange GDX tool, which is a business development tool for you to use. We also have the Cybersecurity Edge website, which holds a number of links to resources that have already been mentioned in this conversation with Carlton and Wayne. So we will share that with you after this, but I'd like to thank all of you for sharing your questions. And Wayne and Carlton, thank you for being so generous with your time. And to our participants, please do fill out the poll if you haven't already.
Happy we could help. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thanks, Cassia. Thanks all.
Thank you.